Rain falls softly through a canopy so dense that only fragments of moonlight reach the forest floor. Mist rises from the earth, carrying the scent of damp soil and ancient wood. This is Hidden Lidar Kingdoms of the Amazon Rainforest, a story revealed not by footsteps or maps, but by beams of light piercing the jungle, uncovering cities long swallowed by trees. You don't need to follow every word. Just let the images drift. Subscribe and tap the bell for more calm journeys. Tonight, discover the forgotten kingdoms hidden beneath the leaves. Asterisk, you hear it first as a low, constant hum. The sound is neither silence nor noise, but something in between the endless chorus of insects. The faint drip of water from leaf to leaf, the sigh of wind through branches so high you cannot see them. The Amazon rainforest is never still. Yet the motion is so steady that it feels like breathing. You notice how the air presses against your skin, thick with moisture, heavy with the smell of soil and green leaves that have been crushed underfoot. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls, the note rising and falling like a question that never finds an answer. And all around you is the shimmer of light filtered through countless layers of leaves, soft and broken, as if the forest does not wish to show you everything at once. It is here, in this weight of air and shadow, that people once built kingdoms. You may imagine the rainforest as eternal wilderness, untouched until explorers forced their way through. But beneath these trees, beneath the roots and vines and soil, lie the traces of vast cities. They were not carved in stone like the ruins of Rome or Egypt. They were shaped from earth, from wood, from fire, from human persistence. And for centuries, they remained hidden, their outlines blurred by forest, until the world forgot them. Pause here. Picture the sound of rain beginning, not heavy, not yet, but the first slow drops tapping against leaves. The smell of wet bark thickens, the ground grows darker, and the forest seems to fold more tightly around you. It is in this atmosphere that the story of hidden kingdoms begins. The canopy as curtain when you stand beneath the Amazon canopy, you see almost nothing beyond a few feet of trees and tangled vines. The forest is a curtain, and it has hidden human stories for centuries. Early explorers, stumbling through mud and swarms of mosquitoes, wrote that no great civilizations could exist here. The soil seemed too poor, the forest too dense, the climate too hostile. They saw scattered villages and assumed this was all the Amazon had ever held. But imagine the irony. As they sweated beneath leaves, as they hacked their way through vines, they were walking over roads that had once carried thousands. They were camping in plazas whose outlines were buried by moss. They were writing dismissive words in journals, while the very ground beneath them whispered of forgotten kingdoms. The forest kept its secrets well. For centuries, stories told by indigenous people of great cities and ancient roads were dismissed as myth. Scholars said the Amazon could never have supported populations so large. And yet, the forest knew otherwise. Lidar as revelation now. Imagine the soft drone of an airplane. It is 2018, and high above the treetops of the Bolivian Amazon, a small plane moves slowly, carrying not explorers with machetes, but instruments with beams of light. Lidar light detection and ranging sends pulses through the canopy, measuring the ground below. From above, the rainforest looks endless. But on the screens of the scientists, something extraordinary emerges. Straight lines where no straight lines should be. Circles where nature prefers chaos. Grids where randomness had been assumed. The forest's curtain has been lifted. Beneath the trees, enormous cities come into view. Plazas, causeways, terraces, even pyramids of earth. Roads stretch for miles, connecting settlements like arteries of a living body. The findings are breathtaking. Tens of thousands once lived here in organized networks long before Europeans arrived. Pause here. Imagine the shock of silence in the plane cabin as the images form. The forest hums below, unaware that its secrets are being seen again. You hear only the faint click of instruments, the whisper of air conditioning, The held breath of people realizing that the past is larger than they ever believed. Daily life reimagined. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are walking not through an endless rainforest, but through one of these cities. The year is 1,000 years ago. The air is still heavy, still humid, still thick with the smell of leaves. But now it is filled also with smoke from hearts, with the scent of roasted manioc, with the cries of traders in the plaza. You step onto a raised causeway, packed earth beneath your feet. On either side, canals glimmer in the sunlight, carrying fish and water to fields that stretch beyond sight. Farmers work the land, growing maize, cassava, and fruits that thrive in this climate. Their voices carry, mingling with the sound of birds. Children run barefoot along paths, laughing as they chase each other between homes built of wood and thatch. Women weave baskets, their fingers moving in practiced rhythm. Men gather near the plaza, preparing offerings for a ritual, perhaps to mark the passing of seasons, or to honor ancestors, or to ensure the rains return in time. The city is alive, pulsing, vibrant, and yet, centuries later, it will vanish so completely that scholars will doubt it ever existed. You don't have to remember each detail. Just let the image drift. Plazas glowing in sun, causeways stretching across wetlands, voices rising and fading, all swallowed slowly by green silence. The forest as keeper. When European diseases swept through the Americas, millions of indigenous lives were lost, and with them, cities fell quiet. Homes collapsed. Fields grew wild. Roads crumbled. Slowly, the forest returned. Trees pushed roots through plazas. Vines climbed walls. Rivers swallowed canals. In time, the cities were no longer ruins. They were forest again. Birds nested in rooftops. Jaguars padded through plazas. Silence folded over everything. What had once been human became wilderness. Pause here. Picture how soft that silence would have been. No explosions, no sudden destruction. Only the slow reclaiming by vines and roots, by moss and rain. Human absence folded into nature's presence, till memory itself seemed to dissolve. For centuries, this was how the Amazon appeared. Eternal, untouched. But it was not untouched. It was layered, built upon, lived in, abandoned, and remembered by the soil itself. Rainforest, you're still listening now. Notice how the rhythm of the story has slowed again. You don't need to hold on to names or dates. It is enough to drift with a sound, to let the breathing of the forest carry you. Time itself feels slower here, as though centuries pass in the space of a heartbeat. The quiet astonishment. Lidar discoveries in Bolivia and Brazil revealed settlements covering tens of square kilometers. Terraces arranged for farming, defensive walls shaped in circles, pyramids of earth rising above the canopy. The scale astonished archaeologists, not only for their size, but for their planning. These were not scattered villages. They were urban centers, carefully designed, home to tens of thousands. The revelation is not just about numbers. It reshapes how we imagine the rainforest itself. Not an untouched wilderness, but a human landscape, managed and sculpted. Forests planted in patterns, rivers diverted, soil enriched through dark earth, known as terra preta. The Amazon was not simply survived, it was engineered. Pause here. Imagine the hands that worked that soil, carrying baskets of charcoal and waste to enrich the land. Imagine the voices of generations passing down knowledge of where to plant, when to harvest, how to shape the forest itself. The hum of insects continues. The smell of damp earth rises, and you feel the presence of people who lived here still lingering, faint as echoes in green air. The soft question and so the Amazon holds within it not only trees and rivers, but memory of those who carved cities into wetlands, who raised pyramids of earth, who built plazas where songs and rituals once echoed, memory of people who adapted, thrived, and then vanished into silence. The forest kept their stories until light revealed them again. But you might wonder, How many more cities rest unseen, hidden beneath canopies, waiting for the breath of light to uncover them? The question drifts into stillness. The forest hums, steady at sleep. Asterisk, you hear the crackle of a small fire, its flames low, its smoke curling upward into the heavy air. Around you, the sounds of the forest press close, the hum of cicadas, the distant cry of a howler monkey, the faint drip of water into a clay jar. It is night, and you sit near the heart of a city that once thrived in the Bolivian Amazon. 1,000 years before today, the fire flickers against the walls of a thatched home. Shadows dance, weaving with the patterns carved into wood beams. Outside, the air is thick with the smell of wet earth, smoke, and roasted cassava. The people here are not strangers to the forest. They are its builders, its farmers, its shapers. In their city, though hidden now, was alive with rhythm. You don't need to remember names. Just let the images drift. The glow of firelight, the rustle of palms in the night, the steady breathing of a city long since swallowed by silence, the rhythm of work at dawn. The mist gathers low along the ground. You step outside and see fields stretching beyond a settlement, not random patches of cleared forest, but carefully designed terraces, raised mounds of earth shaped to keep roots dry above floodwaters. Women bend over crops of maize and beans, their hands moving in repetition, their voices carrying softly across the damp air, carrying softly across the damp air. Men walk along canals, checking water levels, adjusting small wooden gates. The air is cool, filled with the smell of wet grass and soil newly turned. Birds gather in flocks, calling in bursts, then vanishing into silence again. For those who lived here, farming was not a battle against the forest. It was a partnership. They shaped the land, and in return, the land shaped them. They created dark earth, terra preta, by layering charcoal, fish bones, and refuse into the soil. Over generations, this black earth grew rich, fertile, unlike the thin soil of untouched forest. Pause here. Imagine the texture of the soil between your fingers, soft, damp, enriched with life. Imagine the satisfaction of planting, of knowing that the ground itself has been transformed by generations before you. The plazas and causeways by midday. The sun is high, its light falling in broken shafts through the canopy. The city gathers at the plaza, an open space flattened and raised by countless hands. Children run across the packed earth, their feet kicking dust. Merchants set out baskets of fruit, clay vessels of chicha, a fermented drink, and bundles of feathers dyed bright red and yellow dot. At the edge of the plaza stands a mound shaped like a pyramid, not of stone, but of earth. Its sides are steep, its surface smoothed by labor. At the top, leaders stand, addressing the crowd. Their voices carry across the still air, weaving through the sound of drums. Causeways stretch from the plaza outward, straight and deliberate, linking this settlement to others miles away. You walk along one of them, the packed earth firm beneath your feet. The forest parted to either side. The smell of resin from nearby trees is sharp, the sound of insects endless. These roads are not merely paths. They are lifelines connecting cities into a network as complex as rivers themselves. Through them move goods, ideas, marriages, rituals, the fabric of life that binds one settlement to another. Pause here. Picture yourself walking along that road, the horizon vanishing into green. Imagine how far it might go, how many lives it might touch, how many stories it might carry. Ritual and memory. As dusk falls, the city prepares for ceremony. Fires are lit in the plaza. Musicians strike drums made of hollow wood, their rhythm steady, like a heartbeat felt across distance. Flutes carved from bone release high, haunting notes that echo into the night. You see people gather, their faces painted in patterns of red and black, their bodies adorned with beads and feathers. At the center of the gathering, an elder speaks. His voice is low, deliberate, shaped by memory passed down from generations. He he tells of ancestors who walked these same roads, who built the first terraces, who called upon spirits for rain. The crowd listens, the firelight reflecting in their eyes. Some close their eyes, swaying with the rhythm of drum and voice. Children lean against their mothers, half asleep, the sound of ritual folding into dream. The forest presses close, its night sounds rising, frogs calling, insects buzzing, leaves shifting in unseen winds. And yet, here in the plaza, there is a sense of stillness, as though the city itself is breathing in unison. Pause here. Imagine the heat of fire against your skin, the smell of smoke in your hair, the steady beat of drums in your chest, the fragility of memory for centuries. This life continued. Seasons of planting and harvest, years of building and trade, nights of ritual and story. But memory is fragile. With the arrival of Europeans, disease spread faster than blades or fire. Populations collapsed, settlements emptied, homes fell in, their thatch rotting into soil, canals clogged with silt, roads cracked, grass pushing through. Plazas grew quiet, their packed earth softening beneath vines. The forest reclaimed it all, not with violence, but with patience. Trees rose where children once played, roots split walls, leaves fell into canals until water became swamp. Pause here. Picture the silence of that return, not sudden, but slow. Each year, a little more overgrown. Each generation, a little less remembered, until what had been a network of cities became only forest again. The hidden resilience, sand, yet. Even as silence fell, something remained. The terra preta did not vanish. It stayed fertile, still distinct from ordinary soil, still carrying the memory of those who enriched it. Roads, though broken, still traced lines visible from above. Plazas, though sunken, still held their shape. And now, with beams of light from the sky, those shapes return to vision. Lidar reveals what the forest had hidden but never destroyed. Pause here. Imagine the outline of a city glowing faintly beneath trees, like embers beneath ash. The city is gone, and yet it lingers, waiting to be seen again. Re-anchor if you are still listening. Notice how time feels slower now. You don't need to remember the details of farming or roads, of rituals or soil. It is enough to drift with the rhythm of their lives, to let their presence fold into the forest around you. History does not vanish. It simply waits. The soft question and so the forgotten builders of the Amazon lived, thrived, and passed away, leaving their memory to soil and silence. They shaped cities from earth and wood, raised pyramids of clay, carved roads through wetlands. They created not wilderness, but landscape managed, planned, remembered. And you might wonder, as the forest hums in your ears, how many more builders lie unseen beneath the canopy? How many more cities rest beneath roots and shadows, waiting for light to uncover them again? The question drifts softly. The drums fade into silence, and the forest breathes once more. Asterisk. You hear rain? Not the sharp rain of storms, but the steady drizzle that lingers in the late afternoon, softening the edges of sound. Each drop patters onto broad leaves, slips down vines, drips into puddles that ripple, then still again. The city beneath the canopy is quieter now. The laughter of children is faint, the rhythm of drums broken, the glow of fires fewer. You walk through the plaza and notice the emptiness. A basket sits overturned, fruit half rotten, flies buzzing lazily around it. A path once swept clean is scattered with leaves. The air feels heavy, not only with moisture, but with absence, as if breath itself has slowed. You don't need to keep the details close. Just drift with the sound of water, with the image of emptiness, with the feeling of a place caught between memory and forgetting, the slow arrival of change. First winds of change did not come from the forest. They came from beyond the ocean. Ships touched distant coasts, and with them came unseen travelers, diseases carried in breath, in sweat, in blood. They moved faster than footsteps, faster than canoes, faster even than rumor. In these cities, people began to cough. Their skin burned with fevers. Families withdrew into homes. Fires dimmed, fields untended. And though the forest had never been their enemy, it waited at the edges, patient. Imagine the sound of silence growing each day. Fewer voices in the marketplace, fewer hands working the fields, fewer feet on the causeways. The roads, once alive with movement, now stretched into quiet distance. Their purpose fading with each step not taken. The unraveling of networks. These cities were not isolated. They depended on each other, on roads that bound them, on trade that carried food, feathers, stories, alliances. When one weakened, others felt the weight. A canal left untended clogged with silt, flooding a field. A plaza without gatherings fell to grass. The drum beats that once called people together fell silent. And without gatherings, without rituals, memory began to thin. Stories still lived, but fewer ears remained to carry them. Pause here. Imagine that silence again. Not the silence of wilderness, but the silence of absence. A silence that remembers sound, and yet no longer carries it. The forest takes back with each season, roots pressed deeper into abandoned terraces. Birds nested in rafters of homes. Vines coiled around the walls of mounds. Slowly, patiently, the forest drew everything back into itself. The smell of wood smoke faded. The smell of wet leaves returned. The texture of packed earth softened. The air filled again with insect hum and frog calls. And the memory of the builders slipped beneath that hum. Hidden but not gone. You stand at the edge of a road, once straight, now barely visible. Leaves cover it, roots split it. Yet beneath your feet you feel the firmness of its design. You feel the trace of human effort, still there, still guiding the shape of the land's survival. In fragments, not all vanished at once. Families lingered. Small groups remained, carrying fragments of memory, planting crops in smaller clearings, repeating rituals in quiet. The great plazas no longer held hundreds, but a few gathered around a single fire. The drums were quieter, the songs shorter, but still they were sung. Even as the forest spread, people survived. They carried seeds. They carried stories. They carried ways of shaping earth and water, though on a smaller scale. Pause here. Imagine one such fire, small, flickering, surrounded by only a handful of faces. The air is cool. The stars are faint behind clouds. Yet the rhythm of survival continues, even in whispers. The final fading centuries passed. Those who remembered the great plazas grew old. Their children knew only smaller settlements. Their grandchildren forgot the scale of cities entirely. To them, the forest had always been dominant, eternal. The roads beneath leaves were not theirs. The mounds beneath roots had no names, and so the memory of cities slipped from human voices into soil itself. It remained not in story, but in dark earth, in fertile fields, in patterns that would not break even under centuries of forest growth. The air thickened with stillness. The fog pressed close each morning. The silence folded in each night. The silence folded in each night. Rediscovery through light for hundreds of years. The forest held its secret. Explorers passed through, missionaries carved trails, rubber collectors cut trees. They saw forest, only forest, and assumed that was all it had ever been. But now, with beams of light cast from the sky, the forgotten pattern stirs again. Lidar traces the lines of roads, the shapes of plazas, the outlines of pyramids made of earth. Beneath the canopy, cities glow once more, faint, fragile, yet undeniable. Pause here. Imagine looking at those glowing lines, like bones beneath skin, like memory beneath silence. Imagine the forest shifting just enough to reveal what it had cradled all along. Riank Reef, you're still listening. Notice how time feels slower now. You don't need to follow every rise and fall, every plaza, every terrace. It is enough to drift with the rhythm of building, of silence, of rediscovery. History is not only what survives in books, it is also what lingers in soil, in shadow, in the quiet of forgotten roads. The soft question and so. The hidden kingdoms of the Amazon faded not with sudden collapse, but with slow silence. They were reclaimed, yet never erased. They wait beneath roots and vines, waiting for eyes and light to find them again. And you might wonder, as the night hums and the rain falls around you, how many more kingdoms lie beneath the forest still? How many stories are sleeping, waiting not to be told, but to be heard? The question drifts, the rain softens, and the silence folds in once more. Asterisk, you hear the slow rush of water before you see it. A river, wide and dark, moves like liquid glass beneath the canopy. Its surface catches stray beams of light, each glimmer trembling before vanishing into shade. The banks smell of damp clay, sweet decay, and faint smoke drifting from a distant clearing. Somewhere, a bird calls, low, throaty, then gone. You stand at the edge of this river and notice how still it feels. Not empty, but heavy, as though the water itself holds memory. You don't need to gather every detail. Let the river carry them as it has always carried seeds, silt, canoes. In silence, cities, by watering the Amazon. Water was not only survival, it was structure. Cities rose along rivers, their lifelines tied to currents that fed crops, filled jars, and carried people across a distance. Roads of earth met roads of water. Canoes slid from plazas into streams, as natural as footsteps on stone. Imagine standing at one of those ancient docks. You hear the scrape of wood against wet clay. You see baskets lifted into boats, filled with maize, fruits, painted feathers. You smell fermenting drink in jars sealed with leaves. The air is thick, humid, alive with both human voices and the endless drone of insects. The city is not only on land. It spreads across the water, carried by boats, tied by rivers, linked by trade. The hidden shapes, when Lidar scanned these floodplains, it revealed not chaos, but pattern. Long parallel mounds, like fingers pressed into earth, traced the edges of rivers. Raised causeways curved through wetlands, bridging water with soil. Circular plazas appeared again, linked not only by roads, but by channels. From above, it looked like embroidery stitched across a green cloth. Each terrace, each canal, each mound was a thread. Together, they formed designs invisible from the ground, yet unmistakable in shape. Pause here. Picture those lines glowing faintly under canopy, geometry, sleeping beneath chaos, order beneath wildness. Living with floods, the rivers of the Amazon rise and fall like breathing. Each year, floods swallowed fields, lifted canoes into treetops, spread fish into forests. For those who built here, survival was not resistance, but rhythm. Fields were raised higher, safe from water. Homes were built on platforms, their stilts sinking deep into soil. Channels guided floodwaters into reservoirs where fish swam, caught later with baskets. Instead of fleeing the floods, people lived within them, turning danger into design. The sound of rushing water became not fear, but signal. It marked planting, fishing, the turning of seasons. Rituals of the river, but water was more than survival. It was spirit. In its depths lived beings, unseen, protectors, tricksters, ancestors. Rituals were performed at the edges, with chants and offerings drifting downstream. Children learned not only to swim, but to speak to the river, to treat it as more than water, as memory, as guide. Imagine standing on a dock at dusk. The air is violet with fading light. Torches flicker, casting wavering fire on ripples. A gourd of drink is poured into the water. Voices rise, low, rhythmic, carrying across the current. You feel the cool air off the surface, the faint mist on your skin, the unbroken flow of the river beneath, the quiet disappearance saying yet. Like the plazas of the first story, these river cities, too, slipped into silence. Floods still rose, but hands no longer tended channels. Boats decayed on banks, there wood softening into mud. Raised fields collapsed into wetlands, their ridges hidden beneath water lilies. For centuries, travelers passed along these rivers and saw nothing but forest. They believed the cities had never been, that people here had always been few, scattered. Drifting dot, but beneath the silence, the rivers remembered. They remembered in the silt, still rich from fields. They remembered in the fish, still plentiful from old canals. They remembered in the very curves of their flow, shaped by human earthworks long forgotten. Pause. Listen again. Imagine the sound of that river, not only carrying water, but carrying memory, rediscovery through light today. When beams of Lidar pass over these floodplains, the pattern stirs again. Raised fields emerge like ghosts beneath the canopy. Canals trace lines still visible in earth. Mounds, docks, terraces, all appear once more, as if pulled from memory into sight. It is not only science that reveals them, but the river itself, offering back what it carried for centuries. If you're still listening, notice how the pace has slowed again. You don't need to hold every image, every road, every channel. Let them drift like canoes along the water, vanishing into distance. The open question and so, the river tells its story of cities that rose along its banks, lived with its floods, and vanished into its silence. They were hidden, but never erased. You might wonder, as you drift with the current, how many more cities wait along rivers unseen. Their memory carried not in stone or story, but in the flow of water itself. The question lingers. The river flows on, and the silence folds in once again. Asterisk, again. Asterisk. You hear it first as a faint rhythm, the steady crunch of footsteps on hardened earth. The sound is soft, dulled by layers of leaves, yet it repeats, steady as breath. When you look closer, you notice what lies beneath the forest floor. A line, straight to be natural, stretching farther than sight allows. It is a road, not a path trampled by chance, but a deliberate causeway, wide and enduring, linking plaza to plaza, village to village, city to city. You stand at its edge. The canopy leans in overhead. Birds shift in shadows, and the air smells of earth turned centuries ago. It feels as though the forest has folded over the road, but the line remains, hidden yet unbroken. Roads of the Hidden Kingdoms archaeologists, who studied Lidar scans, found not only cities, but lines between them, networks of roads stretching for miles. Some were straight, even cutting through ridges and wetlands. Others curved, following rivers or linking terraces. Together, they formed something once unimaginable, an interconnected landscape, a civilization woven across hundreds of miles. Imagine walking one of those roads at night. You hear the muffled calls of animals beyond the trees. You see torches carried ahead, flickering against the leaves. You feel the packed earth underfoot, raised just enough above the ground to stay dry even in rain. The road is not wilderness. It is order drawn across chaos, guiding you through the dark. The flow of goods along these roads moved not only people but goods, painted pottery shaped with delicate designs, tools of stone and bone, feathers bright as flame carried from distant forests, salt essential for life traded across miles, food grown in raised fields, maize, cassava, maize, beans carried in baskets on backs. You might picture a caravan of figures moving along the road, the smell of woven mats filled with roasted roots, the sound of clay jars knocking against one another, the shimmer of feathers packed carefully, their colors glowing even in dim light. Trade was not a luxury, it was survival, linking scattered villages into a shared web, and still, each object carried meaning. Pottery was painted not just for use, but for ritual. Feathers were more than ornament, they were offerings, symbols stories. Salt was life, and so was honored like a gift from the earth itself. The sound of ritual bud goods were not the only things carried along these roads. Rituals moved to stories, songs, chants. Each city had its ceremonies, yet many shared rhythms. At plazas, linked by roads, people gathered to sing, dance, offer to spirits, and mark the seasons together. Imagine standing in one of those plazas as dusk falls. You hear drums carved from hollow trunks, their beats rolling through the air like thunder. You see dancers move in circles, their bodies painted, their steps measured. You smell smoke rising from fires fed with resin and leaves, thick and sweet. The roads carried not just trade, but memory. They ensured no city was alone. A network beneath the canopy from above. Lidar showed how vast this network had been. Roads radiated from plazas like spokes from wheels, branching outward, connecting dozens of settlements. Some causeways ran straight for miles, even through swamp and forest, their lines unbending. It was not random, it was design. The forest had long been imagined as endless chaos, but Lidar revealed a hidden geometry. Cities, canals, roads, plazas, all stitched together into order. Pause here. Let the image form in your mind. A canopy, thick and green. Beneath it, a web of light, straight lines and circles glowing faintly, connecting what once seemed scattered. You don't have to remember each line, each city. Let them drift like stars glimpsed between clouds, patterns half seen, yet enough to feel the quiet vanishing. And yet, all this, the goods, the rituals, the roads, fell into silence. One by one, plazas emptied. Roads softened back into soil, their lines hidden beneath roots and vines. Fires went out, songs faded, and the network dissolved. Travelers centuries later saw only the forest. They thought the people had always been scattered, that no roads had ever crossed the canopy. But Lidar tells another story. The silence of the forest is not absence. It is covering. The roads are still there, beneath the soil, waiting, patient, enduring. Reassurance. Pause. If you are still listening, notice how time feels slower now. You don't need to hold every image, the roads, the plazas, the trade. It's enough to drift with the rhythm, to feel the quiet weight of centuries folding in. The open question and so, the roads whisper their memory. They remind us that what seems empty may still be full, that what feels wild may still carry order, that silence may still echo with footsteps long gone. But you might wonder, as you drift in that silence, how many other roads sleep beneath the forest, unseen, stretching farther than we can yet imagine. The question lingers. The forest breathes, and the silence folds in once more. Asterisk, you hear the first hints of change, not in the roar of rivers or the crack of thunder, but in the subtlest sounds, the dry rustle of leaves where once the air had been wet, the faint crackle of soil hardening under heat. The rhythm of rain shifted, and in a land where water was both blessing and burden, that rhythm meant survival. You notice how the canopy above still trembles with bird calls, yet the ground below grows less certain. Where once canals carried water in balance, now floods came too fierce, or droughts too long. And so, the people who had mastered the landscape found the land answering back in ways more difficult to control. The fragility of balance for centuries. The cities thrived because they worked with the forest cycles. Roads were raised to stay dry, fields were lifted above floodwaters, and canals brought balance to excess rain. But every system has limits, and when weather shifted, the margins grew thin. Picture a village after a flood. You hear the slosh of water against walls built of earth. You smell the rot of damp wood. Fires refuse to catch, smoke curling weakly before it fades. Food stores, once safe in baskets, begin to spoil. Families move their mats higher, their voices low, their steps uncertain. Now imagine the opposite, a drought stretching through months. The canals that once glittered like threads through the fields sink into mud. The soil cracks. The air is heavy with dust, carrying a sharp, bitter temps. Without balance, harvests faltered, and with them, the strength of the network. The quiet unraveling of trade when food was less. Trade weakened. The roads that once carried baskets full of cassava and maize now echoed with fewer footsteps. Pottery no longer traveled far. Songs that once crossed from plaza to plaza grew quieter. The sound of the network fading was not sudden. It was like the slow dimming of lamps at night, each one going out in turn until only darkness remained. You can imagine walking one of those straight roads now, centuries after. The canopy folds close. Vines drag across the path. Roots break through the once packed earth. The air is still, save for the hum of insects. You feel the weight of silence pressing in, filling spaces once alive with voices, conflict beneath the canopy and yet, climate alone was not the only shadow. Where resources grew scarce, conflict often followed. Some archaeologists believe rivalries deepened, cities turning inward, protecting what remained. Imagine a fortified plaza, wooden palisades raised higher. You hear hammers striking stakes, the sound carrying sharp in the air. Children watch silently as defenses rise. Where open markets once welcomed neighbors, fires burn longer into night, casting uneasy shadows. We do not know all the details, but the story is familiar. When balance breaks, people struggle, and unity frays. The roads that once connected may have become boundaries instead. The return of forest slowly. As people moved away, the forest returned. Trees pushed through plazas. Roots split walls. Leaves blanketed causeways. The sound of drums and footsteps gave way to the calls of monkeys. The drip of rain, the sigh of wind through vines. The cities did not vanish in a single moment. They dissolved, little by little, as silence spread. Centuries later, when explorers walked the same land, they saw only forest. To their eyes, it seemed untouched, eternal. They could not hear the footsteps that had once beaten those roads, nor see the geometry beneath the canopy. To them, the forest was wilderness, not memory. The persistence of memory, and yet, fragments endured. Pottery shards buried in soil. Earth mounds covered in green. Straight ridges beneath roots, to be natural. Local stories of spirits, of ancestors, of places in the forest where one should not walk at night. You stand at the edge of such a mound. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth. A bird calls once, then silence follows. You feel the ground firm under your foot, more solid than the forest floor around it. This is no accident. It is the ghost of design, the memory of a city, holding its place through centuries of cover. A modern rediscovery. Only in recent years did Lidar pull back the cover, revealing again the scale of what had been. Patterns appeared on screens, grids, plazas, roads, canals. The forest, so dense that no eye could pierce it, was shown to be filled with memory. You don't have to picture each line in detail. It's enough to let the idea drift, that beneath silence there is structure, that under green there are ghosts of roads, that what seems empty may still be full. Reassurance. Pause. If you are still listening, notice how time feels slower now. The details, floods, droughts, roads fading into roots, do not need to stay with you. It's enough to let them flow past, like water through a canal, carrying memory gently forward. The open question, gently forward. The open question. And so, the forest reclaimed the kingdoms, drawing vines over stone, leaves over earth, silence over song. Yet, Lidar tells us they are still there, waiting, hidden. You might wonder, as you drift in this quiet, how many other cities lie beneath the canopy, unseen, unimagined, their roads still stretching silently through the shadows. The thought lingers, unresolved, as the forest breathes once more. Asterisk, You hear the forest long before you see it. The soft drip of water falling from leaf to leaf, the whisper of wind threading between branches, the distant rumble of thunder rolling over hills. Every sound in this place carries weight. For those who lived here centuries ago, each sound was a message, sometimes warning, sometimes blessing, sometimes mystery. And so, when night fell and fires glowed low, people spoke of spirits. They did not see the forest as empty. They saw it as full of presence, full of unseen company. To walk alone in the dark was never truly alone. The spirits of rivers and rain's water ruled this world. Too much brought floods, too little brought drought. And so rivers were thought to have tempers of their own. You picture a wide, slow river under moonlight. The surface shimmers, carrying both reflection and darkness. You hear the lap of water against a canoe, the creak of wood, the soft dip of a paddle. To those who traveled its length, the river was alive. Stories told of beings that lived beneath the surface, half human, half creature, guardians of currents. They could pull a careless traveler under or guide one safely home. To step into water was to step into another realm, one that listened and remembered. Rain, too, carried spirit. The first drops on dry earth were more than weather. They were the sky's voice. You smell the sharp, fresh scent rising from soil as the first storm of the season breaks. Families lifted their faces to the downpour, letting it soak through skin, hair, clothes. Each storm was both feared and honored, for it decided the fate of harvest. The guardians of the forest, the canopy above, was not only trees. It was thought to be a dwelling place, a vast house where beings moved unseen. Hunters spoke of figures glimpsed only at the edge of vision, shadows between trunks, eyes glowing faintly before fading. You imagine sitting at a small fire deep in the forest. Beyond the circle of light, the dark is thick, alive with chirps and rustles. You feel the hair on your neck rise as if watched. For those who lived here, that sensation was not dismissed. It was recognition of the forest watchers. Children were taught never to mock the silence, never to laugh too loudly at night, for the guardians listened, and disrespect could bring misfortune. In this way, belief kept people careful, kept them aligned with the rhythm of their environment. The spirits of sickness, not all spirits, were gentle. Illness in this humid land came suddenly without clear cause. Fevers rose, rashes spread, weakness drained strength. To explain such mysteries, people spoke of spirits that moved invisibly through the air. Picture a small hut at the edge of a village. Inside, a patient lies under woven blankets, their skin hot to the touch. Outside, a healer chants softly, shaking a rattle filled with seeds. The sound is steady, repetitive, meant to drive away the presence that clung to the body. Smoke rises from herbs burning nearby, sharp, bitter, filling the air. You cough lightly at the imagined scent, but for them, it was cleansing. Each leaf carried power. Cades, flame, carried prayer. Rituals of balanced life here was always about balance between wet and dry, feast and hunger, health and sickness, seen and unseen. Rituals helped maintain that balance. You hear the rhythm of drums, slow at first, then building. Feet stamp on packed earth, raising a soft dust that mixes with the smell of smoke. Masks carved from wood cover faces, painted with bright pigments from the forest. The masks are not decoration. They are transformation, allowing a dancer to embody spirit in such rituals. The boundary between human and more than human blurred. For a night, in the glow of firelight, the community stepped into another world, one where ancestors and spirits listened closely. Echoes beneath the Lidar maps. When Lidar revealed the roads and plazas, it showed us geometry, order, and human design. But to the people who built them, those spaces were not merely functional. A plaza was also sacred ground. A road was also a ritual path. You stand in such a plaza in your mind. The earth beneath your feet is flat, firm, one swept clean by careful hands. Around you, structures rise, long houses, storage huts, ceremonial posts, but more than wood or stone, you feel presence. The air seems charged, holding echoes of chant and drum, of laughter and prayer. Even if Lidar maps every line, it cannot capture this. The spirit of place is not in shapes, but in memory, in what people believed as they stood there. Reassurance. Pause. If you are still listening, notice how your mind drifts between shapes and sounds. The line of a road, the flicker of fire, the hush of forest. You don't need to keep each detail. It's enough to let them float, like leaves on a slow current dot. The open question and. So, the forest was never silent to those who lived within it. Every rustle, every shadow, every drop of rain carried meaning. The cities were not only built of earth and stone, but also of story and spirit. You might wonder, okay, as you drift now, how much of what Lidar shows us is only half the picture, the skeleton without its soul, and what other stories remain, still folded into the silence of the canopy. The thought lingers, unanswered, as the forest breathes in darkness once again. Asterisk, you wake in a hush before dawn. The forest is still dark, but the air has shifted. Somewhere far above, the canopy stirs, and faint light begins to slide between the branches. You hear the long, slow call of a bird echoing into the emptiness. It is the hour when night lingers, yet morning presses close. For those who lived in the hidden cities of the Amazon, this was a time of beginnings. Fires were coaxed back to life from embers, their smoke curling into the cool air. The scent of charred wood mingled with the sweetness of damp leaves. A day was waiting, full of quiet tasks and unseen rituals. Homes woven from forest yew pictured the houses long, narrow structures made of wood and palm thatch. The walls were not stone, but living materials, pulled from the forest and tied with patience. Roofs sloped steeply, shedding rain when storms swept through. Step inside in your imagination. The air is warmer here, heavy with the smell of smoke that lingers from the hearth. Mats woven from reeds lie in the ground. Tools rest in corners. Baskets, clay pots, nets drying after a night in the river. The space is simple, yet filled with life. Each creak of wood in the rafters, each shadow moving as the fire shifts, reminds you that people once lived here, shaping their world with care. The soil of black earth beyond the homes. You see patches of dark soil, not the pale, exhausted earth of ordinary ground, but terra preta, black earth created by human hands. This soil was a quiet miracle. By mixing charcoal, food scraps, and broken pottery into the dirt, people built fertility where the forest alone could not sustain fields. Over generations, these soils grew richer, capable of feeding whole communities. You kneel in your mind and touch it fine, crumbly, warm against the skin. Even today, centuries later, the earth remains fertile, a living memory of human presence. Each grain holds traces of meals eaten, fires tended, gatherings shared. Food for survival. In ceremony, what did they eat? You imagine a spread: maize roasted over coals, cassava bread crisp at the edges, fruits gathered from nearby trees, sweet guava, creamy avocado, the sharp tang of passion fruit. The forest was both pantry and challenge, offering abundance in some seasons and scarcity in others. Fish came from rivers, caught with nets or traps. Their scales shimmered like liquid silver before being placed on embers to crackle and release their sharp, salty scent. Hunting brought peccary, tapir, or monkey, each carried back with ritual respect. Nothing was taken without awareness that the forest, too, was watching at feasts. Food became more than nourishment. Imagine a circle of people seated on low stools, passing bowls of fermented drink. The liquid sour and strong, made from cassava or maize. Laughter mixes with drum beats. Stories weave through the smoke. The air is thick, not only with heat, but with connection. Paths of movement. Lidar revealed not just homes and plazas, but also long causeways, straight, deliberate, cutting through the forest with precision. You walk along one in your mind. The ground is raised slightly, firm beneath your steps, guiding you between villages. Trees lean close on either side, but the path remains clear, as if insisting that travel here was meant to be easy, meant to connect. Such roads were not only for trade. They carried memory, the echo of feet, the creak of baskets on backs, the murmur of voices moving between communities. To walk them was to participate in a larger whole. A network hidden now beneath vines and silence. The hum of daily craft during the day. The soundscape filled with quiet labor. The tap of stone tools shaping wood. The scrape of pottery being smoothed. The rustle of baskets woven from palm fronds. Each task was rhythmic, repeated, like a drumbeat that never stopped. You hear it now, the steady strike of stone on wood, the soft thud as fibers twist into rope. The work was ordinary, yet it kept life moving. Every tool made, every pot fired, every mat woven added to the invisible scaffolding of survival. At times, songs accompanied the labor, low, repetitive chants that kept hands moving in time. Work was not silent. It was folded into the larger music of life. The children's world of life. The children's world. Imagine the children running barefoot along the packed earth of plazas, chasing each other through the shade of trees. Their laughter rises, sharp and quick, before dissolving back into the hum of the forest. They learned early how to fish, how to plant, how to watch the sky for signs of rain. But they also played, their small hands tracing patterns in the dirt, their eyes wide at the flicker of firelight during ceremonies. For them, the city was both playground and classroom, each corner filled with lessons from elders and whispers from the forest itself. The unseen labor of women, the rhythm of daily life. Women's work often unfolded quietly but continuously, preparing cassava, tending fires, carrying water in heavy clay vessels, weaving cloth from cotton spun by hand. Picture the scene, smoke rising as cassava is peeled and grated, its bitter juices drained carefully to remove poison. The smell is sharp, earthy, filling the air as dough is pressed into flat breads and laid on hot stones to crisp. Children hover nearby, waiting for the first pieces around them. Cloth grows slowly on backstrap looms, threads stretched taut, colors drawn from plants, reds from roots, yellows from bark, deep blues from indigo-like leaves. Each movement is patient. Each finished cloth, both practical and ceremonial. The night's return end when the day ended. The city softened again into shadows. Fires glowed low, insects filled the air with steady rhythm, and the stars appeared above, vast and unbroken. Families gathered close, sharing the last of the day's food, telling stories of ancestors and spirits. Some tales explained the land, why the river curved, why the rain delayed, why sickness struck. Others simply carried memory, names of those long gone but still present in the words. You sit with them now, in your mind. The fire crackles softly, sparks rising into the dark. The air is heavy, but in its weight lies comfort. The forest presses close, not as enemy, but as constant companion. Reassurance, pause, if you're still listening. Notice how your breath slows as you follow these rhythms. You don't need to hold every detail. The sound of the paddle, the taste of cassava, the heat of fire. It's enough to let them drift, settling lightly, like smoke fading into night. The open question and. So, life in these hidden cities was woven not only from earth and wood, but also from repetition, ritual, and memory. Roads, homes, fields, and plazas may now appear only as shapes beneath the canopy, but once they were alive with laughter, with labor, with the pulse of ordinary days. As you drift, you may wonder how much of daily life anywhere here now will remain if centuries pass and only silence is left to tell the story. The question rests, soft and unfinished, as night folds itself once more around the forest. Asterisk. You hear it before you see it, the steady rhythm of insects at dusk. A hum that seems to rise from the earth itself. The air thickens with warmth, heavy with the smell of damp soil and wood smoke. In the distance, a faint chant carries across the plaza, voices weaving with the crackle of fire. It is a gathering for the dead, for those who built the hidden cities beneath the Amazon's canopy. Life and death were not opposites. They were folded together like night and day, river and shore. To die was not to vanish, but to enter another layer of the forest, one that still touched the living. The mounds of memory Lidar revealed more than homes and roads. It traced outlines of raised mounds, small hills that stood out against the flatness of the earth. These were not natural. They were built, shaped by human hands. Each mound a marker of memory. You picture one now, a gentle rise of earth overgrown with trees. Roots twist downward, leaves scatter across its slope, but beneath lies structure, layers of soil and ash, pottery fragments, offerings placed with care. Families gathered to build such mounds, carrying baskets of soil, piling them over the remains of ancestors. Each layer was both practical and symbolic, lifting the dead higher, closer to the sky, farther from the damp ground below. You imagine the feel of soil spilling from a basket, warm and grainy between your fingers as it falls onto the mound. Each handful was an act of love, of remembrance, of continuity. The silence of burial death rituals varied, but always carried silence. Bodies were sometimes cremated, their smoke rising into the canopy, a visible thread connecting earth to sky. Other times they were buried, placed in urns of clay, painted and decorated, sealed beneath earth. Picture a clay urn, wide and round, resting in a shallow pit. Its surface is etched with lines, its lid carefully fitted. Around it lie offerings, beads, tools, bits of food. Reminders that the journey beyond was also a journey with needs. The smell of clay and ash hangs in the air. You hear the hush of voices, the soft rustle of leaves as people gather in a circle. There is grief, yes, but also acceptance. To them, the boundary between living and dead was thin, porous, always shifting. Ancestors among the living even after burial, the dead remained close. Ancestors were thought to dwell in the forest, in rivers, in the soil itself. Their guidance shaped decisions. Their presence lingered in rituals. You sit in a night gathering, firelight flickering against faces. Stories are told of a grandmother who once guided the planting of maize, of a hunter who brought back food in a time of scarcity, of a child whose laughter still echoes in dreams. The dead were not absent. They were folded into daily life, their memory sustained in each meal, each planting, each story told by Fireht. The plazas of ceremony. Some Lidar sites revealed large plazas, open spaces surrounded by raised platforms. These may have been stages for ceremony, not only of the living, but of remembrance. Imagine standing in such a plaza at dusk. The ground is flat, wide, pressed by countless feet over generations. Around its edges, fires burn in clay basins, their smoke rising into the canopy. In the center, dancers move, their bodies painted with red pigment, their steps slow and deliberate. Each movement honors the past. Each drumbeat echoes like a heartbeat, connecting present bodies to those long gone. The sound reverberates in your chest, steady and deep, as if the earth itself joins in rhythm. The persistence of offerings. Archaeologists who studied the earth of these mounds often found fragments, shards of pottery, beads carved from bone, seeds charred but preserved. These were offerings, placed with intention, left as bridges between worlds. You kneel by such a fragment in your mind, a small bead, smooth from touch, lying in dark soil. Its color has faded, yet it still carries memory. Who held it last? Was it strung as jewelry, worn at a feast, or pressed into the hand of the dead as a farewell. The forest may reclaim much, but some things resist forgetting. Reassurance. Pause, if you are still listening. Notice how the story slows, how time feels stretched. You don't have to remember each ritual, each mound, each offering. It's enough to let them drift, soft as smoke rising into night air. The collapse into silence when European contact brought disease. These rituals became fewer. Entire communities weakened, unable to maintain the ceremonies that had bound them together. Fires that once burned through the night went cold. Plazas grew over with weeds, but silence itself became another form of ritual. The forest, in its own way, carried memory. Vines twisted over mounds, trees rooted in abandoned plazas, soil-covered urns with patience. What people could no longer sustain, the earth held quietly. You imagine walking through such silence. No drums, no chant, only the sound of rain dripping from leaves, the cry of a bird in distance. Yet beneath your feet lies memory, unseen, waiting, echoes through Lidar and now. Centuries later, beams of invisible light pass through the canopy, tracing the shapes once hidden. Each mound, each platform, each road emerges again, not as ruin, but as outline. You see it on a glowing map, white lines on black, showing plazas, causeways, clusters of homes, and among them, the mounds, the cities of the dead, revealed once more. Yet even with Lidar, what remains is incomplete. The geometry is clear, but the spirit, the chant, the grief, the laughter folded into mourning that remains beyond reach. Technology illuminates shapes, but only imagination restores presence. The open question and, so, the hidden kingdoms of the Amazon were not only for the living, they were also for the dead, for ancestors who lingered, for spirits who guided, for mounds that rose quietly toward the sky. You may wonder, as you drift now, how many other cities of the dead lie waiting, still wrapped in vines and silence, their stories folded into soil. And if the forest itself remembers, how much of that memory will ever return to us? The thought lingers softly, unanswered. Night deepens once more over the hidden world. Asterisk, you stand at the edge of a great plaza, though you cannot see it with your eyes. The canopy has folded over. The vines hang low. The soil is uneven. Yet beneath your feet lies a place where voices once gathered, where drums once echoed into the night. Now, there is only stillness. It is a silence that holds memory. Not a silence born from peace, but one grown from absence, from the sudden vanishing of thousands, from the sudden vanishing of thousands. The first shadows long before ships appeared on the distant coasts, these cities thrived. Roads stretched outward, fields of cassava and maize fed whole communities, rivers carried trade and song. Then, slowly, shadows began to drift inland. Illness came first, invisible, silent. It traveled ahead of the newcomers. It rode on air, on breath, on contact. One day, a village laughed around its fires, and days later, the fires burned for mourning. You imagine the fever, skin hot to the touch, eyes glassy, sweat dampening mats. Outside, the forest continues its rhythm. Insects hum. Rain falls, but inside, silence grows. The people did not know the name of this sickness. They only knew that it did not leave, that it spread from family to family, taking strength with it. The unraveling of ceremony without enough hands, rituals faltered. Plazas, once swept clean, grew over with weeds. Fires, once tended at dawn, smoldered out. Mounds that had received offerings lay quiet, their surfaces untended. You picture a ceremony interrupted. A drum rests, untouched beside the fire, its skin slack, no hand to strike it. Masks hang unused on posts, their colors fading as rain seeps through. The air holds the memory of chant, but no voice rises to carry it. In this way, collapse did not come with loudness. It came with stillness. The flight into forests, some families fled, leaving behind the great plazas and causeways. They disappeared into smaller clearings, deeper into the forest where sickness had not yet reached. You walk with them in your mind. Baskets slung across backs, children carried on hips, fire kept alive in a small clay vessel. Each step sinks into mud, each sound of movement softened by the pressing silence of the canopy. They find new ground, build smaller shelters, light smaller fires. Survival continues, but without the vast networks of before. The great cities fade into the vines, the weight of absence imagined, standing in a once busy plaza months after disease swept through. Where laughter once rang, there is only the buzzing of flies. Where smoke once curled upward, only vines crawl. You hear the creak of branches, the drip of water, the sigh of wind. The human sounds are gone, replaced by the endless murmur of the forest. Absence itself becomes heavy, like mist pressing on the skin. It is not emptiness, for the forest is full, but it is a fullness that erases memory, swallowing roads, collapsing roofs, softening the edges of plazas. Echoes of resilience. Yet, not all was lost. Some knowledge lingered. Families carried seeds into exile, still planting cassava, still shaping black earth, still telling fragments of stories around smaller fires. Picture a tiny clearing far from the great plazas. A mother grates cassava route, the sharp scent filling the air. A father mends a net by firelight, his hands moving by habit. A child listens to an elder speak of spirits who guard the river, eyes wide, heart carrying the weight of memory. Even as great cities dissolved, fragments of culture survived, folded into daily life, waiting for centuries in the silence. The forest embraced the Amazon as patient. It does not rush to erase. Slowly, season after season, trees rooted in the plazas, vines coiled around posts, leaves fell and layered over pathways. You imagine walking down a causeway centuries later. It is narrow now, half hidden, but underfoot you sense its firmness. The deliberate rise of earth shaped by human hands. A liana dangles across your path. A butterfly drifts past. The air is thick with the smell of damp soil. The forest has not destroyed. It has hidden, embraced, folded away. Like a blanket laid over memory, it holds the shape of what was. Waiting. Reassurance pause. If you are still listening. Notice how these images drift slowly, the plaza fading into vines, the drum left unplayed, the family carrying fire into exile. You don't need to hold every detail. It is enough to feel the rhythm of presence and absence. The way silence fills the spaces between sounds. The unknown count historians. Stay still wonder how many people lived in these hidden cities before collapse. Some say millions, their lives woven across thousands of miles. Others imagine smaller numbers. The forest does not give exact answers, but Lidar maps suggest scale, vast networks of fields, roads, plazas, more than scattered villages, more than small tribes. A civilization, complex and alive. You stand above such a map, glowing lines on a dark screen. Each dot is a home, each square a plaza, each road a thread connecting thousands. Now, all of it lies silent beneath trees. The thought is vast, difficult to grasp. And so, you let it drift, like a constellation glimpsed for a moment before clouds return, the open question and so. Collapse came not with a single blow, but with slow unraveling. Fires went cold, voices went quiet, plazas filled with vines. Yet memory lingers in soil, in seeds, in fragments of story. You may wonder, as you drift into stillness, if silence itself can hold memory. What else waits beneath the forest? Not just shapes of cities, but echoes of laughter, fragments of song, whispers that only the trees still hear. The thought softens, unanswered, as the canopy folds once more into night. Asterisk. You hear the river, First, its endless rhythm, rolling dark and wide beneath the weight of clouds. The water reflects flashes of light as oars dip, pulling strangers deeper into the forest. It is the 16th century, and the world begins to change. For the people who lived here, the river had always been familiar, a pathway lined with memory. But now it carried ships that did not belong, men who spoke with unfamiliar tongues, carrying objects that gleamed with metal, fabrics dyed with colors from distant lands. The sound of arrival was not loud. It was not battle at first. It was the creak of wood, the unfamiliar ring of iron against stone, the cough of men unused to the heaviness of this place, the weight of disease already present long. Before these men arrived in numbers, their shadow had spread. The diseases they carried, smallpox, measles, influenza, had already drifted through trade routes, moving faster than the ships themselves. You picture a village that once bustled with life. Fires burned in each home. Cassava bread crackled on hot stones. Laughter echoed in plazas. Then, without warning, fever spread. Bodies weakened. Songs grew faint. The forest did not change, but the people within it did. The silence that followed was vast. And it prepared the way for those who came next. First contacts, when Europeans stepped ashore. They found land that seemed strangely empty. Villages stood abandoned, fields grown wild. Yet in truth, these were not untouched lands. They were places emptied by illness, by grief, too great to measure. You stand in one such clearing. A stone tool lies half buried in the soil. A fragment of pottery rests beneath roots. The houses are gone, roofs collapsed, wood rotted. But in the earth are traces of meals, fragments of ritual, marks of lives lived fully. The newcomers did not always see this. To them, silence looked like wilderness. But for the forest, silence was only another form of memory. The missions of the crossing time, missionaries followed. Their voices carried prayers. Their hands raised crosses against the sky. They came with intentions, both spiritual and imperial, to reshape lives, to gather people into missions where European order could replace local rhythm. Picture a mission town, rows of houses built in straight lines, a chapel rising at the center, its bell calling people to gather. The sound of that bell is sharp, metallic, unlike the soft thud of drums. Its ring carries over the canopy, cutting through the air. For those drawn into such towns, life changed. Rituals tied to forest and ancestor were discouraged or forbidden. The cadence of the day was now marked by bells and sermons, rather than drums and chants. The forest, once a partner, was pushed back. Fires burned less brightly in plazas, less frequently in mounds. The labor of survival colonial hunger demanded more than land. It demanded labor. Many of the surviving peoples were pressed into carrying, cutting, planting, serving. Others were drawn into distant expeditions, forced to guide strangers through the labyrinth of rivers. You hear the strike of axe against a tree, the groan of wood falling, the call of overseers urging speed. The sound is heavy, unlike the soft, patient rhythm of village work, where once labor had been woven with ritual. Now it became demand. The weight of survival shifted, bending under new burdens. Fading of the great city's end. So, the great Amazonian cities, already weakened by disease, faded further. Their plazas were not swept. Their causeways crumbled beneath creeping roots. The mounds of their ancestors grew over with vines. The forest did not destroy them. It simply covered, softened, held them in patience. For centuries, these places lay hidden, their memory whispered only in fragments, in stories carried quietly by descendants who remembered. You imagine walking through such silence. The canopy stretches high, green light filtering down. Your steps sink into leaf litter, yet beneath you sense the firmness of earthworks, a line too straight to be natural, a curve too deliberate to be chance. The forest holds secrets, waiting for rediscovery, reassurance. Pause. If you are still listening, let these images drift slowly. You don't have to hold every detail: the bell of the mission, the silence of plazas, the sound of axes on wood. It is enough to feel the contrast between noise and stillness, between presence and absence, and to drift with the rhythm of both. The new rhythms of Faith Haven. As missions spread, older beliefs did not vanish completely. In hidden moments, away from the eyes of priests, families still whispered prayers to rivers, still left offerings of food for ancestors, still listened for the hum of spirits in the night, and for the hum of spirits in the night. You picture a woman lighting a small fire outside her home, murmuring words in her own tongue. She presses cassava bread into the embers, a gift for unseen beings. The act is quiet, almost invisible, but it carries continuity. Faith was never erased. It only shifted, blended, adapted, flowing like the rivers themselves. The forest's quiet resistance, despite centuries of intrusion. The Amazon resisted complete transformation. Its density, its endless canopy, its overwhelming scale made it difficult to conquer fully. Many Europeans perished here, undone by fever, insects, rivers that swallowed boats whole. For every mission that rose, another failed. For every settlement that endured, another was abandoned. You hear the hum of insects, relentless, unending. You feel the heaviness of air that saps strength. You smell the damp, rotting sweetness of vegetation. The forest itself became a kind of guardian, preserving what lay beneath, not through intention, but through sheer persistence. Echoes beneath the canopy, and now, centuries later, Lidar peels back the forest's veil. Roads appear again, mounds take shape, plazas reemerge. The maps reveal what the missions and the silence could not erase, that vast cities once thrived here, alive with ceremony, laughter, survival. It is as if the forest had been waiting, holding memory safely until a new way of seeing could uncover it. The open question, and so, the age of contact reshaped everything. Disease hollowed communities, missions pressed new rhythms. The forest folded cities into silence. Yet even in silence, memory lingered. You may wonder, as you drift into stillness, if the forest can keep such vast kingdoms hidden for centuries. How many other memories of people, of rituals, of cities still wait beneath the canopy, untouched, unseen, quietly breathing? The thought rests unanswered as the hum of the rainforest folds once more around you. Asterisk, you hear the slow fall of rain. It begins as a whisper, droplets tapping against the broad leaves of the canopy, then deepens until the whole forest seems to breathe with water. Each drop falls heavy, then disappears into the soil below. Time in the Amazon often feels like this, a rhythm of endless repetition, where years blur into centuries. For those who looked at the forest in later centuries, what they saw was not memory, but emptiness. The plazas had been swallowed. The causeways no longer stood visible. The people who once filled them had been reduced in number, scattered by illness and colonial demands. And so, from the outside, the Amazon came to be seen as a land that could not hold civilizations. The myth of the empty forest travelers in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries wrote of the Amazon as wilderness. They described rivers winding endlessly, forests stretching without interruption, villages only in small clusters along the banks. You imagine such a traveler, seated in a canoe, notebook damp from humidity. He sees only green walls rising on either side, the tangled roots, the calls of unseen birds. His pen scratches on the page. Unbroken forest, no cities, only savages dwelling in small huts. The words carry the confidence of observation, yet they miss what lies hidden. The roots of trees grow upon ancient embankments. The rivers cut through man-made canals, now softened by time. Every stretch of wilderness he writes about is layered with older presence. The silence of the plazas made it easy to forget. The forest had folded them away, leaving little for the hurried eye to notice the weight of European imagination for centuries. European imagination insisted on two extremes. Either the Amazon was a paradise, a garden where fruit fell freely, where abundance required no labor, or it was a green hell, a place of fever, insects, suffocating heat. You feel both extremes as you sit in the forest. On one side, the sweetness of guava drifts on the air, parrots flash color above, rivers offer endless fish. On the other, the buzz of mosquitoes swarms your ear. Sweat runs heavy, and the darkness beneath the canopy feels suffocating. Both impressions were real, yet neither captured the truth that civilizations had shaped this place for centuries. The idea of the empty forest became comfortable, a way to imagine that nothing had been lost, because nothing had ever existed. Scientific voices in silence even when hints emerged, they were often ignored. Explorers found earthworks too straight to be natural, shards of pottery far inland, fields that seemed patterned. Yet these signs were often explained away. Chance formations, remnants of tiny villages, curiosities rather than evidence of grandeur. You picture a scholar in the 19th century, studying a mound of earth covered in vines. He jots down a note but shakes his head. The forest feels too vast, too overwhelming. Could it really have been home to cities? His mind, trained on the ruins of Greece and Rome, cannot see cities in mud walls and earth mounds. He closes his notebook, and the question drifts into silence once more. The forgetting deepened, not because evidence was absent, but because belief insisted otherwise. The forest's quiet erasure, the Amazon has a way of making absence feel natural. When a plaza disappears under vines, it looks like ordinary undergrowth. When a causeway erodes, it resembles a ridge of earth. Rain smooths the edges, trees anchor themselves into the cracks. Roots wrap around stone until it seems part of the forest itself. You touch such a tree. Its trunk rises wide, its roots float like frozen rivers over the ground. Yet beneath, if you dig, you might find the walls of a home or the edge of a plaza. To the casual eye, it is only forest. But to the forest itself, it is memory held gently. Not erased, but disguised. This slow disguise is part of why forgetting lasted so long. Nothing dramatic marked the ruins. They simply blended into green, till even the descendants who remembered stories could not point to the full shapes of cities. Generations of silent centuries passed this way. Generations grew up along riverbanks, tending small gardens of cassava and maize, hunting, fishing, raising families. The stories of older grandeur survived in fragments, in myths of ancient ancestors who built roads of earth, who called down spirits to shape the land. But to outsiders, these sounded like legend, not history. Imagine sitting with such a community by firelight. An elder speaks softly, voice crackling like the wood. She tells of ancestors who built with earth, who raised mounds higher than the trees, who danced in plazas so wide they seemed endless. The fire flickers against her face, shadows deepen, and the story feels both real and unreal. For those listening, it is memory. For outsiders, it is myth. And so, for the wider world, the Amazon remained defined by forgetting. Midway re-anchor reef. You are still listening. Notice how time feels slower now. You don't need to hold every name or detail. It is enough to drift with the sound, the hush of rain, the imagined crackle of fire, the soft blending of memory and forgetting, the persistence of doubt. Even in the 20th century, scholars still doubted. Theories argued that the Amazon soil was too poor to support dense populations, that farming could never sustain cities, that the environment itself was hostile to large societies. You picture a lecture hall. A professor stands at a chalkboard, drawing diagrams of soil types, explaining why complex civilization could not have existed here. Students nod, taking notes. Outside, rain falls softly against windows. The forest, thousands of miles away, waits silently, holding its secret. The irony is heavy that certainty can exist even in the face of silence. That absence of evidence was treated as evidence of absence. Small hints, stubborn questions, yet not all voices agreed. Archaeologists uncovered Terra Preta Dark, fertile soil created by humans mixing charcoal, food waste, and pottery shards. This soil remained rich even after centuries, able to support crops where natural soil was poor. You kneel by such soil, sifting it through your fingers. It is darker, softer, richer than the earth around it. It holds fragments of pottery, tiny reminders of meals long past. Such soil does not form by accident. It is human memory embedded in earth. Each patch of terra preta hinted at more, at farms, at households, at communities larger than the myths of emptiness allowed. But these discoveries were often set aside, considered anomalies rather than part of a wider pattern. The forgetting was not just silence, but persistence of disbelief. The forest's patience through all this. The forest remained patient. It did not rush to reveal. It allowed trees to grow tall, vines to thicken, animals to roam across forgotten plazas. It layered time slowly until the ruins felt inseparable from nature itself. And yet, deep beneath the canopy, the lines of cities remained. Roads still connected plazas. Mounds still rose beneath roots. Patterns too precise to be chance still slept in the soil. It was as if the forest knew that memory would one day return. When eyes could look from above, when technology could pierce through leaves. Until then, it kept its silence. The question of memory and, so, the centuries of forgetting stretched long. Scholars dismissed. Travelers overlooked. Myths were folded into legend. The forest disguised. And yet, the truth remained, waiting. You may wonder, as you listen, how often does history repeat this? How many other places lie disguised, written off as wilderness, when in truth they are layered with lives, with cities, with memory? The question lingers, soft and unresolved, as rain continues to fall through the canopy, You hear the steady hum of an aircraft engine. At first it is distant, a low vibration that seems to blend with the forest's own endless drone of insects and birds. Slowly, the sound becomes more distinct, as though carried by invisible waves. You look upward through the dense canopy. The leaves shimmer faintly with light, and beyond them, a machine glides across the sky. From below, the aircraft appears ordinary, just another plane tracing its course. But this one carries eyes that are not human. Lidar beams pulse downward, invisible to your eyes, sweeping across the forest in quick, unrelenting strokes. With each pulse, the forest is gently peeled away, leaf by leaf, branch by branch, until the ground itself is revealed. For centuries, travelers looked upon this same forest and saw only an unbroken expanse of green. Now, in moments, technology strips back the canopy, not with axes or fire, but with light itself. And what emerges is astonishing. Shapes beneath the green, beneath the endless trees. Patterns glow. They are not random, not the tangled geometry of vines or roots. They are straight lines, perfect circles, repeating grids. Entire plazas appear, wide and circular, connected by roads that run for miles. Canals cut across lowlands, ditches shape fields. Mounds rise into sight where before there seemed only flatness. You imagine the Lidar images flickering on a screen in the aircraft. At first, the researchers stare in silence. What they had expected were perhaps small clusters, a few scattered mounds. Instead, the patterns stretch wide, revealing cities more complex than they dared to guess. On the screen of the canopy disappears, leaving only light and shadow. And there it is, geometry, too precise to be nature's. Memory returning after centuries of silence. The quiet astonishment of rediscovery. For those who first studied these Lidar maps, the feeling was not loud triumph, but quiet astonishment. The data spoke in whispers. just as the forest itself always had. You picture a scientist sitting late into the night, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. She traces lines with her finger, following a road from one plaza to the next. Each connection opens new questions. How many people once lived here? How did they farm? How did they govern? How did they endure? Her coffee grows cold beside her, forgotten. Outside, the night is silent. Yet she cannot look away from the screen, where centuries of forgetting dissolve, and a hidden kingdom emerges once more. Echoes of the past. What Lidar revealed was not one city, but many networks stretching across hundreds of miles, in places where explorers once wrote of emptiness. The light showed plazas large enough for thousands, causeways broad enough for constant travel, fields engineered with care. You see it as if the canopy has been made transparent. The roads run like veins across the land. The plazas glow like open palms. The canals shimmer faintly, still following the course shaped centuries ago. Even the mounds, softened by time, stand visible in this new light. And with each revealed shape comes an echo of voices that once filled the plazas, of footsteps that wore smooth the causeways, of children who played in courtyards, now hidden. The forest had never forgotten. It simply waited for someone to listen again. The hum of the present even now. Lidar surveys continue. Planes and drones pass silently above the canopy, sending down waves of light. On the ground, teams walk carefully through undergrowth, comparing the maps to what they see. Sometimes, what appears as a clear square on the map is nearly invisible to the naked eye. Only a gentle rise, a faint curve of earth. You walk through such a sight. The air is thick with humidity. Mosquitoes whine in your ears. The undergrowth catches at your ankles. To your eyes, there seems nothing unusual, just vines, roots, a few uneven ridges. Yet, when you look at the Lidar image, you see it clearly. A plaza, a mound, a road. The forest disguises, but the light reveals. The hum of machines, click of GPS receivers, the rustle of leaves. All these sounds blend together. The modern world and the ancient intertwined quietly, without clash. As though the forest accepts both. Midway, re-anchor reef, you are still listening. Notice how time feels slower now. You don't need to follow each detail or each image. It is enough to drift with the sound, the low hum of engines, the rustle of leaves. It's a slow unveiling of what has always been there. Redefining memory with each discovery. The story of the Amazon changes. The old myths of emptiness fade. The narrative of small, scattered tribes gives way to a recognition of complexity, of cities that thrived in balance with the forest. You think of the elders who told stories by firelight, of ancestors who danced in plazas so wide they seemed endless. Once their stories were dismissed as legend. Now, Lidar shows that they carried truth woven into memory. The forest itself confirms what voices had whispered all along. To look at these images is to feel the ground shift beneath history. Not wilderness, but civilization. Not emptiness, but abundance. Not silence, but echoes waiting to be heard again. Human feelings, human scale beyond the data. You wonder about the people themselves. What was it like to sleep in homes along those causeways? To wake with the sound of insects and birds? To see the sun break across plazas filled with neighbors? You feel the texture of woven hammocks, the warmth of clay hearts, the smell of roasting cassava. You hear laughter in courtyards, footsteps on packed earth, the distant call of someone paddling across a canal. These lives were not abstract. They were as real, as ordinary, as fleeting as any. And now, centuries later, their memory rises again, not through ruins of stone, but through light pulsing across forest canopy. The forest's quiet reply in a way. The forest itself seems to reply to these revelations. It has kept the memory safe, not destroyed, but hidden. And now, as beams of light pass through, the forest allows glimpses. Not all at once, not fully, but enough to remind enough to suggest you stand still, listening to the forest breathe. Cicadas sing in waves, then fall silent. Leaves drip with rain. Somewhere far off, a monkey howls. The forest does not resist revelation. It simply remains what it is, vast, layered, endlessly alive. What emerges through Lidar is not conquest of nature, but dialogue with it. The unresolved one day, and so, with each survey, the map grows richer. More cities appear, more connections, more patterns, too precise to ignore. The forgotten kingdoms return, not in ruins you can touch, but in shapes revealed by light. You may wonder, as you listen, how many other places across the world wait like this, covered, disguised, dismissed as wilderness, yet holding memory just beneath the surface. How many other stories lie waiting, patient until light passes through again? The question lingers, soft and unresolved, like the hum of the aircraft fading once more into distance. Asterisk, you sit beneath the weight of the canopy, feeling the dense air press against your skin. Around you, the forest never truly rests. Cicadas drone in long, vibrating tones. A bird calls once, then falls silent. The smell of damp earth mixes with sweetness, the faint perfume of blossoms hidden high above. Every breath carries layers: soil, wood, decay, renewal. And as you listen, you remember what the light has shown. Cities beneath your feet, roads that pass invisibly below the vines, courtyards filled not with silence, but with memory. For centuries, they have been erased from maps, and yet here they are, waiting, a civilization disguised for much of modern history. People thought the Amazon was too poor to support great populations. The soil, they said, was thin, unfertile, quickly exhausted. And so they imagined the rainforest as a green emptiness, capable of sustaining more than scattered villages. But the Lidar beams whispered otherwise. They revealed not scattered traces, but cities, vast, interconnected, thriving. To survive here, people built not in opposition to the forest, but in harmony with it. They reshaped the soil with charcoal, bones, and compost, creating what scientists now call terra preta, dark earth, rich and fertile. Still productive centuries later, you kneel down in imagination and press your hand into such soil. It crumbles soft between your fingers, almost black, with a faint warmth. Within it lie fragments of pottery, broken long ago, each shard carrying its own story. The soil is not simply dirt. It is memory transformed into nourishment. And so the forest itself became a partner. Gardens bloomed, fields flourished, orchards lined plazas. It was not wilderness, not emptiness, but cultivation at a scale we are only beginning to understand. Asterisk, the daily rhythm of survival. You imagine a morning in such a city. The mist hangs low, blurring the outlines of houses. Smoke rises gently from clay hearths, carrying the smell of cassava bread baking, maize roasting, fish drying over slow flames. Families stir awake in woven hammocks, their warmth clinging even as the air around feels damp and cool. Children run across packed earth's courtyards, laughter cutting through the hum of insects. Women stir pots thick with roots and grains, the rhythm of their stirring matching the quiet chants of elders. Men gather tools, digging sticks, fishing nets, baskets for harvest. Their motions practiced, unhurried, passed down through generations. The sound of a drum calls across the plaza, not loud, but steady, echoing through the mist. It is both signal and heartbeat, marking time where the forest has none. And so the day begins. In balance with forest and water, roads like veins, and water, roads like veins. When Lidar beams swept across the forest, one of the most surprising revelations was the roads. Straight, impossibly straight, stretching for miles. They ran like veins through the land, connecting settlements, crossing rivers, climbing ridges. You close your eyes and hear footsteps along one such road, sandals pressing softly into earth, traders carrying woven baskets filled with cacao beans, gourds of fermented drink, ornaments carved from bone and shell. The road carries not just goods, but words, songs, marriages, alliances. At night, the same road becomes a ribbon under starlight. Torches flicker, shadows stretch long, insects gather in clouds around the flame. The road remains firm, guiding travelers even through darkness. It is more than a path. It is connection itself. The silence after when then, centuries later, the silence. No more drums in the plaza. No smoke rising from hearts. No laughter of children at play. The roads fall quiet, grass pushing through cracks. The plazas sink into vines. The canals clog with silt. The forest folds in layer by layer until only shadows remain. You walk now through such a place. The air feels heavy, the silence deeper than elsewhere. Birds still call, insects still hum, yet something in the rhythm feels different, as though the forest itself carries memory of what is gone and holds it in reverent quiet. For a long time, these silences were misread as proof of absence, but now, with light revealing what lies beneath, we know the silence is not emptiness. It is aftermath. It is survival of the forest after the people had gone. Midway, Reef. You're still listening? Notice how slowly the minutes pass here. You don't have to remember each fact, each image. It is enough to drift with the sound, the echo of drums, the quiet of roads, the hum of insects pressing close. What caused the silence? The question lingers. Why did these great networks fall quiet? Some speak of disease, new illnesses carried from far across the sea, illnesses to which local bodies had no defense. Others point to conquest, waves of violence that moved slowly but inexorably into the basin. Still others suggest climate shifts, long droughts that strained the balance between people and forest. Perhaps it was all these things together. For civilizations are rarely ended by a single blow. More often, they unravel thread by thread until what remains is only fabric too thin to hold out. And yet, the forest endured. The trees grew taller, the rivers shifted, the vines climbed higher. The memory remained in soil, in shards, and the hidden geometry beneath the humility of rediscovery for those who walk these sites today, guided by Lidar maps. There is a sense of humility. To stumble upon a mound shaped centuries ago, to trace a canal cut by unseen hands, to stand in a plaza once filled with life. It is to feel small but connected. You press your palm to the side of a mound. Moss clings to stone, cool and damp. You can almost feel the heat of fires once built here, the pressure of footsteps long faded. It is not ruins of stone like Rome, not pyramids of Egypt. It is softer, quieter, almost erased. And yet, no less real, the forest chose to cover, but not destroy. The forest chose silence, but not forgetting. Human resilience. Human fragility. These rediscoveries remind us that human history is not only grandeur carved in stone, but also fragility hidden in green. Civilizations rose here, balanced with soil and river, thriving in ways we are only beginning to piece together. And then they fell, not because they lacked intelligence or spirit, but because no society is unshakable. You think of their resilience, the soil they created that still feeds crops today, the roads that still stretch straight and clear beneath canopy, the balance with nature that lasted centuries. You think, too, of their fragility, how quickly silence replaced sound, how complete the forgetting became. And in that balance between resilience and fragility lies something deeply human, something that still speaks softly across the centuries. The open question and so you sit once more in the humid air, hearing the forest all around. The cicadas rise, then fall. The branches creak faintly overhead. A droplet of water slides slowly from leaf to leaf, then lands softly on your skin. You think of what has been revealed and what remains hidden still. For every city mapped, there are surely others waiting beneath the green, for every echo remembered. Countless others remain silent. The Lidar beams sweep again across the canopy, peeling back another layer, whispering another truth, and you cannot help but wonder how many more stories lie beneath this endless forest, waiting patiently for light to find them. The question drifts with you, unresolved, like mist folding once more around the trees. Asterisk, the night deepens above the forest. The heat of day begins to soften, replaced by a damp coolness that clings to your skin. Somewhere in the distance, a frog calls once, twice, then falls quiet. The canopy overhead blocks most of the stars, but here and there you glimpse a pale shimmer of moonlight slipping between branches. You sit still, listening, noticing how the silence here is never truly empty. There is always motion, a leaf dropping, a beetle scraping, a bat passing in a whisper of wings. The forest exhales slowly, and you breathe with it. And as you drift in this quiet, the weight of discovery settles around you. Beneath the soil, beneath the roots, beneath centuries of vines, lies a record, not written in ink or parchment, but in earth and stone and memory, a revelation of scale. When Lidar first revealed the scale of these hidden cities, the surprise rippled far beyond archaeology. For centuries, the Amazon was seen as an untouched wilderness, its trees thought to stretch endlessly without human hand. But what the light uncovered changed everything. Geometric plazas, wide ceremonial causeways, canal systems stretching for miles, agricultural terraces spiraling up hillsides. These were not scattered villages, but societies as complex and ambitious as those of Mesopotamia or the Nile. You imagine yourself rising slowly above the canopy, not with machines, but in thought. Below you, where before was only endless green, now shapes emerge. Squares, circles, lines, faint, like ghosts at first, then sharp, undeniable. Cities revealing themselves as if through mist. It is as though history itself had been waiting for the right angle of light, the right kind of gaze, before allowing itself to be seen again. The balance with the forest, one of the most humbling lessons, lies in how these people survived here. For the Amazon is not an easy place. Its beauty hides challenges: poor soil, floods, storms, biting insects, predators that move unseen in the undergrowth. To live here required not conquest, but balance, and so they learned to work with the forest. They cultivated terra preta, the dark earth created through slow accumulation of charcoal, bones, and organic matter. They grew crops, not in endless cleared fields, but in shifting gardens, woven between trees, refreshed by cycles of planting and rest. They guided rivers with canals, but allowed floods their place. You picture their evenings, families gathering near fires, hammocks swinging gently, the smell of cassava bread and smoked fish mingling with wood smoke, children listening to stories of spirits in the trees, warnings about balance, about greed, about respect for the land. Stories that were not mere myths, but guides for survival. And in those moments, you sensed that knowledge here was carried not in books, but in memory and rhythm. The rhythm of planting, of harvesting, of listening to the forest itself. The fragility of memory, but memory is fragile. When new illnesses swept through the Amazon, carried by travelers from distant lands, they tore through communities unprepared. Populations fell, sometimes by half, sometimes by more. Roads grew quiet. Ritual plazas emptied. The rhythm faltered. The forest, patient as always, stepped forward. Vines thickened. Roots pressed into walls. Termites consumed beams. What had been cities faded into silence. And over centuries, even the memory faded. The forest covered so completely that later generations, arriving from elsewhere, could not believe there had been anything before. They saw wilderness. They imagined emptiness. They called it untouched, but it was never untouched. It was simply covered. You pause, listening to the present silence, and realize how thin the veil between forgetting and remembering can be, how quickly stories can vanish, and how easily silence can be mistaken for absence. Midway re-anchor, if you are still listening, notice how time feels slower now. The words drift like leaves on water. You don't need to follow each detail. It is enough to let the rhythm carry you, the hum of insects, the breath of forest, the quiet uncovering of memory. What Lidar has given back Lidar light detection and ranging. It's become like a lantern held high above the canopy. Its beams pass through leaves and branches, measuring every rise and fall of earth. Where the human eye sees only green, the machine sees geometry. For archaeologists, it is as though a curtain has been drawn aside. Entire networks emerge in a single sweep. Raised causeways, water reservoirs, ceremonial platforms, structures so vast that they could never have been guessed. From the ground, you imagine standing with a map newly printed from such scans. At first, it looks like abstract patterns, but slowly, as you trace the lines with your finger, a city forms. Streets radiating from a plaza, roads running straight as arrows to distant neighbors, mounds rising like steps into the sky. The paper in your hands feels warm, though it is only an image, for on it lies proof that what was forgotten still endures. Lessons for the present. Lessons for the present. The rediscovery of these hidden kingdoms carries lessons far beyond archaeology. It reminds us that the Amazon, vast as it is, has always been a place of human presence, not fragile wilderness untouched until recently, but a landscape shaped by countless hands, countless lives. It also reminds us of fragility. Civilizations that thrived for centuries, building soils that still sustain crops today, vanished swiftly when balance broke. The forest took back what had been given, and silence replaced sound. And so, in their memory, we glimpse a mirror for our own time. For we to live in an age of environmental change, of fragile balances, of choices that echo far beyond our years. The question drifts quietly. Will our own roads, our own plazas, someday lie hidden beneath silence? Or will we learn, as they once did, to live in rhythm rather than resistance? A forest of echoes night deepens further, and you hear the sounds shift again. The cicadas fall silent. A night bird calls, its tone long and low. The air feels thicker now, filled with the scent of damp moss, with the faint sweetness of unseen flowers. You imagine the echoes that still move through this forest, the drumbeat from a long-forgotten plaza, the murmur of trade along a road, the laughter of children chasing each other past gardens rich with maize and cassava. These echoes are not gone. They are folded into the silence, waiting. And when the light passes overhead again, scanning, searching, measuring, it calls those echoes forth, one by one. And so, in this way, the past is never truly lost. It lingers, soft, persistent, like mist along the ground. The final drift, you lean back now, listening to the endless hum. The forest presses close. The silence folds in. The air thickens once again, and you wonder how many more cities lie waiting beneath this green. How many more stories remain unspoken, their plazas hidden, their roads covered, their people forgotten. The Lidar beams will sweep again, uncovering more, reminding us that even in the deepest silences, there are histories yet to be heard. But for now, you rest with the echoes already found. Cities beneath the canopy, voices folded into soil, lessons whispered through roots and rivers. And as the night deepens, you drift into that same silence, carrying the open question, what else, still hidden, waits to be seen?